That's why I never started drinking or that. It's quite difficult for me to
Stop.
kick things or to change, or to even just change the routine. So, once you get into a mode, it's difficult for me to change it. But I probably have low willpower in that regard. When you sort of get into doing something, anything like that. So, I mean, that's good, man.
Did you do? Would you say you were kind of that way with video games at different points?
I was very addicted to video games. I knew the amount of time that I was playing video games wasn't good, but I never got fat or anything. So
No, I'm just
to
saying,
me,
staring at a screen all day is still, it's not good for you.
yeah, but I mean, I never got fat, so I was like, oh, well, maybe it's not that bad in terms of my health.
Oh, yeah.
So I just, so there's nothing really stopping me. If I had a health scare, then I would stop, obviously. But I mean, I was playing in my adolescent years. I was playing maybe 15 hours a day, which I mean, obviously negatively impacted my education and everything else. But don't get me wrong, I learned quite a lot from video games, which is sort of strange to say. Only
No.
certain video games, Fallout being one. I mean, that was a total perception shift. But yeah, not all video games were. I didn't find them all a waste of time. I played a lot of strategy games as well, so yeah.
No, I did. I wasn't even into, other than Call of Duty, Halo, Counter-Strike, and some other first-person shooters, which I only played for short periods. It's like you get pretty good at it really fast if you have any sense of mechanics and everything, and it gets boring when you're at the top of the leaderboards all the time. You're bored, so it gets old, and I always ended up with pretty much solo strategy games. I mean,
Yeah.
and you learn a lot from it, but what I'm talking about is just as far as addiction goes. It's like,
it's
there was unhealthy ways that you played games, like the 15-hour days. We all did LAN parties for multiple days way back in the 90s and stuff. And it was all bad. We also ate all the worst stuff. You don't pay attention to your diet. You don't, and you might not get fat.
I used to eat loads of Doritos and Mountain Dew.
Pringles, Doritos, pork rinds, everything.
Oh
right? Anything you can grab with your hands and still grab the controller or the keyboard. Oh,
do you do pork rinds and pork scratchings through in America? I didn't realize that. I thought it was a British thing.
It is. We have it though. We have a lot of the imported stuff. All became very big in the last couple decades. We have entire aisles at our grocery stores are like just Asian imports. Really? We have entire supermarkets that are Middle Eastern. I mean, they don't even have an American name on them on the outside of the building. Like, I don't know what they're called. I just know they're grocery stores from the Middle East.
No, we have them as well. We have halal and all of this, but which, funnily enough, I don't actually mind because some of their food, the ingredients actually are slightly better, which is weird to say, but they are.
Well, and there's stuff you can't get that they said they have there, but they're not at your local grocery stores. For whatever reason, whatever agenda, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, with the games, I thought Assassin's Creed was probably better than any elementary history class you could have ever had.
I agree.
And there was a variety of other, even hand-eye coordination and the strategy games and understanding stuff like hidden walls. Like when I talk about game mechanics, that's what I'm talking about. Like as a beta tester for game development, right? like having an eye for that. I mean, it's in a digital world, that's a skill that it can't be taught. You know, like being able to see beyond the digital world, even, and know when something's false within the false digital world. I mean, as weird as that sounds, like it's. I think that's a key signifying aspect in someone of discernment. You know,
Oh
someone
no,
who has a great discernment would have that ability.
I found that as well with Fallout. Some of the world building as well was very interesting because with the world, for example, the way the skeletons, of this previous sort of golden age of Americana, this alternative era that America drifted into, diverged from our timeline sometime in the 40s or 50s, and it just stuck in that it was stuck in that static aesthetic and culture and what have you. But technology progressed through the lens of that culture. However, when you see the skeletons, the way they're lined up, the way the way they're placed, it sort of tells a story through the environment, through the world building, and you could pick up on things. For example, you may need to get into a safe, right? You might have to get into the safe. You need a key, right? So then you have to check check the the terminal, check the notes. Or say it's the janitor or the manager has the key. You then have to find where the manager would be per se, and go there, find the skeleton. Typically, he'll be in some sort of he'll be in a desk. He'll be on a chair behind a desk, something like that. Again, world building, sort of investigatory gameplay, right? I think it's called emergent gameplay. I think that's what it's called. So you build a sort of, not a fantasy, but a narrative in your head of what you thought happened just at that moment, just at those moments that the nukes fell. And it gets your mind working. I found it very rewarding, in that sense. It's like opening a novel, right? But within the novel, you have stories within stories, right? The characters might have their own dilemmas. The characters may have their own motivations, and really piecing that together, it can be quite rewarding again, and it stimulates the mind, stimulates the creative mind, the creative intent of the viewer. It doesn't just make you some, for example, if you're playing Call of Duty, you're not really engaged on that level. You're only really engaged in a sort of competitive sense in terms of your motor coordination skills, right? But you're not really engaged in a higher creative sense. You're not a co-creator within the story. You're not playing the investigator. You're not sort of attempting to discern what's going on in the world. And by that, you build the world in your mind. I mean, it's very much like it's the problems, I think, with a great deal of the media now, because it doesn't challenge the viewer. It doesn't challenge the the reader, the gamer, what have you. So it essentially treats them like a consumer rather than a human with their own creative intent, their own value, their own potential. And I think games, for example, that I like what you brought up with Assassin's Creed. That was very similar in that regard. There was a lot in the world, and you felt immersed, and you could, there's a great deal of world building too. So it sort of interacted with you on that higher level, right? And it asked something of you. It challenged you. And I think that's the problem with modern media. It doesn't challenge the viewer. So it dehumanizes them. It takes away their potential rather than cultivate their potential. It takes it away. It just turns them into a consumer. So I don't necessarily think, because a lot of people, they are deeply opposed to just storytelling, media, all of that. I don't necessarily see it like that. I think it's the way media is set up. I think it's propaganda nowadays, rather than attempting to cultivate the potential within people so they can go on and tell their own stories, create their own art, provide a soul to the society. Because really, see, this is the issue with society as well. What's going on in society, it's not a problem, it's not a mechanistic problem. It's not a problem you can fix with policies. It's something that's deeply spiritual. It's at the very metaphysics of the society. That's the problem. I think it really gets into all that, games and everything like that. And I see a lot of the new games don't challenge you like that. Even some of the new Bethesda games, Starfield, never really challenged the gamer like that. It didn't have the world building like that. It was like Fallout 3 or New Vegas, or it was disappointing in that regard.
I thought games started going downhill, in the late 90s, even. I mean, sure, like
Yeah.
some of the titles we're talking about all came out after, but that's why those games were some of the most successful franchises, is because they had world building, they had character, they had all these different elements. Because the majority of the games that were chopping out at those times were these Minecraft games, is what I would call them.
Yeah.
They're like almost pointless, repetitive. Because that's what I was saying with like the Call of Duties and Halos and stuff like that. It was fast respawn, right? Run in and shoot them up. Like that. That was basically what the games became. And you're not involved with, like, if you actually read the Halo books or the stories and the whole enterprise realm, right? Like, it's the same size as Star Wars, Star Trek, and all these other ones that also have a whole bunch of books that tell all these other stories that build a world that mimic our own, our own past, and I mean, even up to the present in some cases, or false futures, or just whatever you'd want to call them. They could just be reimagined futures based on the past and stuff like that. But it's just, I thought it was funny how like the games switch so quick, because one of the first games that I got involved with was SOCOM, U.S. Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the first online mass multiplayer, 16 players on a console, all hooked up through the internet, right? No LAN. And SOCOM had an element of, each match was like 20 minutes. Like when you started the round, um, you all started on whatever side, right? Two teams, usually 8 against 8 or so. But once you died, if you got shot right at the beginning, well, you were just out. You just sit there, and they do have some games like that, but they're really high speed still nowadays compared to those days. It was, 20 minutes. Some of them were 45 minutes. If you have two guys just camping out on either team, everyone else is dead. All the dead people we're all just hanging out talking the whole time. And the difference at that time, though, was you did have all the communication, and we did all chat a lot, and you like developed relationships like you would, in your neighborhood with neighborhood friends. And you did discuss the game mechanics, and you discuss, like, there was more involvement in what was going on because you wanted to survive. You want to be one of the last ones standing. You don't want to be sitting in the dead circle talking with everybody else, you know. And I don't think it was even out for a year before Call of Duty started the quick respawn on one of theirs, and that's why I would say it was around that time that games really just started going that direction. It was all about the 10-second attention. Who can hold the 10-second attention, lose it, and gain it back again, almost, And it just created a, well, I think that's where you get the autonomous just operator worker.
Yeah.
And that's
Oh, that's yeah.
that's all
You'll
the people that I'm looking at every day.
you
But
get you
hey,
get the sandboxes. So you either have that, you either have the sort of like what you're saying, the fast respawn, low attention, um, sort of competitive shooters, or it might be any sort of competitive thing. And
that's what Fortnite is, right? That's
yeah,
Fortnite's entire
battle
basis.
royale, yeah.
Yeah.
But you on the other side, you have RPGs which have been turned into sandboxes. So essentially, what is a sandbox? It's for juveniles to with minimal effort put on the on the side, minimal effort on the side of the creator of the sandbox. He basically builds a box, fills it up with sand, and the sort of interactor, the child, the juvenile in this sense, or the gamer in this sort of sandbox games, they use their imagination to create the game, right? But the problem is there is with a lot of these games, because they're being churned out. Starfield, for example, the new Bethesda game is a prime example of that. Where there's literally nothing. It's a barren wasteland, literally a sandbox, right? In terms of a desert, there's nothing there. They've put nothing into it, no world building, and in essence, there's nothing for you to interact with, right? I mean, there's not even any sand in the sandbox half the time. So, I mean, this is the issue as well. But like what you're saying, it's that drone worker, drone, sort of operator, assembly line type mentality, and they're turning games into that. They're turning all media really into that. Where when you go into media, unless you check your brain at the door, you're not going to enjoy it. And see, this is the issue as well. Because human beings are a story, we base our entire understanding of things on stories, right? Essentially. Archetypes, stories, everything like that, right? And when you don't include any of these, say, cultural archetypes, any of these markers of storytelling within media, and you attempt to destroy the media, use its propaganda, hijack it in any way, or just turn it into sort of drab, boorish, slop-filled garbage, then that's going to have a knock-on effect with the entirety of society. And the reason it'll have that knock-on effect is because people aren't engaged with the culture. They're not actively co-creating along with the artists, along with the media, along with the storytellers, right? They're not actively creating culture. So, and of course, I mean, that's not really their fault as well. A lot of the actual artists, musicians, storytellers, directors that have anything to say, they're being barred from pursuing that within the cultural industries, because the cultural industries are controlled by coinage, by the mercantile elite, and they have an agenda. The agenda seems to be some sort of great reset, a hard reboot of the society into some sort of managerialist state. Oh, we have Zeal. Zeal, hello, if he's there.
Be shy.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Zeal. Yeah.
How are you?
So, yeah, I'm doing well. How's you?
Yeah, not too bad.
So, we'll steer the conversation to what's going on in Ireland. I'm just interested. We see, I believe it's Newtown, Mount Kennedy,
Yeah,
and County Wicklow, I believe. There's
Yeah.
been heavy-handed riot police presence there, in
Yeah.
response to protests against, I believe, some sort of migrant
Yeah.
caravan or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you my 2 cents on it as best I can. There's the story, and then there's the story behind the story, right? So there's an A and a B in this, that as far as I can see it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, so story A is, as what it says on the tin, we've got a number of migrant centres. Like, Ireland is a very small town. Like, it's a village. This country is a village. It's not even, everyone knows everyone. It's super local and it's super, close knit. So what's happened? You got these small rural communities around the place where they've designated disused hotels, motels, guest houses, old houses, etc., whatever, and designated them as facilities for migrants coming into the country. So we've had a bunch of stories in the last, I'm going to say year or two, maybe more, where there's been, basically, from what we can see, the locals have not been down with the whole, migrants coming into the community type thing. So there's been protests and or arson attacks and or standoffs with the police, this kind of thing. And from what I can see, most of that, as far as I can see, is legitimate, actual, real people protesting. They don't want people coming in. Most of it seems to be that way. For example, we had a recent case in Galway where there was a designated place that was going to be a facility for refugees coming into the country, and supposedly the locals got wind that this place was going to be designated for refugees, right? So the local building contractor, was actually doing up the premises, and the premises was previously run down. So he's remodeling it, as you might say in America, or they were just basically doing it up, And once the story goes, once he got his job done and got the thing done up, he got paid, and as soon as he got paid, somebody threw a match to the whole place and burnt it to the ground.
Ugh.
And what we've been told is that this is a sort of a local. And there was another case of it here in my own county going back, I don't know, a year or two ago, where they protested outside a building, a former hotel that was being repurposed for this refugee thing. And there was a kind of a standoff down there, which petered out, as far as I'm aware, and that was that. So this particular one, a place called Newtown Mount Kennedy, which is, I'm going to say, like 3/4 of an hour's drive south of Dublin. It's over in the east of the country. It's kind of roughly within the Dublin commute remit, I'm guessing. But what happened was the same type of story. There was a standoff between protesters and police. Riot police showed up, actually fully kitted up in the, shields, batons, helmets, the whole 9 yards, shock troop kind of job, and they baton charged the protesters. And you've got the whole thing on social media, Twitter, etc. So the long story short is, you're trying to get an opinion on this, even talking to people here, it breaks down into a whole plethora. Some people are not interested at all. They think they don't want to know about it. I spoke to a friend of mine who just doesn't want to know about it. He's educated guy, professional. He says, I don't watch that kind of stuff anymore. It's bait, and they're just stirring the shit, trying to get public emotions risen up. I spoke to another person who I'm close to who would be very conservative type person, very middle of the road, very sort of uber normie, hard right normie. And he said, they didn't hit those protesters hard enough. The cops should have beat the crap out of those protesters, and they're just a bunch of no good. They're not working, and they're on social welfare, and they're down there causing trouble, and the cops should have beaten them twice as hard, etc. I spoke to yet another friend of mine who's very, very kind of conspiracy theorist type, level thinking. His thing on it was that the people that are coming into the country are essentially military operatives or paramilitary operatives, and they're sneaking a whole army in here. And at some point in the future, it's going to kick off. We're going to be facing these people down. Not that I mean to be laughing at his opinion. Who knows, right, at this point? But that was his opinion. So the reason I'm just give you a kind of a smorgasbord of opinions, depending on who you're talking to. Someone else I was talking to says, fairly conservative. Enough is enough in the country. We're getting inundated. It's unfair, etc., etc. So what you have is you kind of have a kind of how do you say it, a barometer of different opinions, a kind of a rainbow. How do you say it, like a spectrum of opinions, right? Now, I was kind of going, because I knew, Silas, you were probably going to talk to me about this. What the hell am I going to talk to Silas about? I'm in Ireland here. I'm supposed to know what's going on. I haven't a clue what's going on, to be honest. I mean, we're getting reports. How am I supposed to give Silas any kind of an angle on this, So I went to the internet, as you do, right? And essentially, very quickly, I went to YouTube and I found our national broadcaster, very conservative, very well established broadcaster, media personality, a news guy, right? Tom Brokaw, that kind of type character, the Irish version of it. And he's given the state appointed conservative view. This protest is unacceptable. The Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, she's right to stand up and say we cannot tolerate this kind of thing, and it's essentially the far right kind of on the rise, and they're giving it all this kind of thing. So in the conservative mainstream media broadcast, you go to the comments section on the YouTube, and the comments section is overwhelmingly, if not all, apparently against that conservative media personality's opinion. So they're all saying, you're wrong, we've been undead, it's time for the Irish to stand up, and they're all banging the war drums on the comments section. So now you have a very clear, just to summarize what I'm saying, the journalist is conservative, and he's supporting this kind of state narrative. The comment section are all against him, meaning it looks like the public have turned now on the MSM, on the mainstream media, if you're to look at that particular video, right? So now you look for an alternative voice in the media in Ireland, and this is where, for my money, it gets a little bit more interesting. So in Ireland, traditionally, as I said, it's a village. It's very unipolar in the media that you wouldn't have had a lot of different types of opinion. And now suddenly I have discovered this media entity who had, quote unquote, the real videos about this baton charge on these poor Irish people who are standing up for their community. And the name of this entity, or this media host, is Gript, Gript. And their logo, the G, right, is tilted to the left a little bit. That's a suspicious focus on the G. Those of you who are into the occult and masonry, their ears will be picking up straight away. But their G is tilted on the logo, and it looks suspiciously like the Russia Today kind of logo, for my money anyway. So Gript, the reason I'm saying this, Gript Media have given the exact opposite side of the conservative media opinion. So Gript Media are down with us, you and I, the ordinary Joe Soap on the street, or Jill, trying to work, trying to get, we're surrounded by all these foreigners coming in, and, we're sick of being told that we're on the far right, and Gript are given this whole kind of edgy, we're not. Let me just some of their spiel here. Let's see if I can get some of this. Here we go. Here we go. Quote, this is from Grip. This is their mission statement. If you are looking for a media outlet that blames everything on the far right in Ireland, then you don't have to go far to find one. If, by contrast, you are looking for a media outlet that looks beyond the cheap sloganeering and tries to understand and report on the real concerns held by ordinary people, then that's what we do here. So Gript is down with us, right? They're not afraid to ask the hard questions, or not afraid to get the far right kind of thing thrown at them in relation to this story. So who are Gript? Next question. Well, Gript are owned by a company who are known as Rivada Networks. Okay? Bear with me on this now. So this is who are Rivada Networks. Well, Rivada Networks are backed by a businessman by the name of Peter Thiel, Thiel. Peter is a co-founder of PayPal. He's one of the first investors in Facebook and Palantir Technologies. Right? He worked at O'Sullivan and Cromwell in New York, securities lawyer, which back in the day where Alan Dulles worked with. Okay? And you might say, well, that's fine. Mr. Thiel is back in Rivada. Well, who's on the ground in Ireland with Rivada, who are, the hosts for this, how do you say it, this Gript thingy, this Gript media entity? Well, now we're talking about a guy called Declan Ganley, Mr. Ganley. Now, Mr. Ganley, by all accounts, is a gentleman, right? I have this from someone who's kind of in his extended network, shall we say. Doesn't know him personally, but knows of him. And Mr. Ganley is an absolute gentleman. He's well liked, well thought of, all the rest of it. But he's a businessman, okay? He's essentially a businessman. And he runs Gript Media in Ireland. Now, Mr. Declan Ganley, we are told, has some connections in the US military, right? So these are the guys now who are your friends telling you about this story about these poor downtrodden Irish people who are trying to stand up for their local community in relation to incoming refugees, right? So your friend in the media telling you on your side is Gript Media, Declan Ganley, quote unquote, this is from the Irish Examiner, in relation to Mr. Ganley, quote, and I quote, Atlanta registered CNN is being sued over a report suggesting the Trump administration pressured U.S. officials to award Mr. Ganley, remember, Gript Media, to award Mr. Ganley's telecoms company, Rivada, a multi-billion-dollar contract to build a 5G telecommunications network for the Department of Defense in America without a competitive tender. So now, in summary, you've gone from a story in some small village in Ireland where a couple of hooligans are getting into a row with the cops over refugees, and you get this story and you get incensed. And when you get incensed, you take a deep breath for a second and you get de-incensed, and you said, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to take a step back from what's triggering me here. And the first question I'm going to ask is, who's telling me what information? Right? You take your deep breath and you take a step back, and one of the things you come up with, well, Gript Media are on my side. That's fine, you're on my side. Now, who's Gript is your next question. And before long, you end up with the US military industrial complex, not to blame it on the Americans, it's a global military industrial complex. You end up with a 5G telecommunications network being built in America for the Department of Defense. And this all came about in a couple of swoops out of a row between the guards, the police, and the locals down in Newtown Mount Kennedy. So in summary, what I would be encouraging people to do, if at all possible, at all times, is to look beyond the story, look beyond the narrative, and do your own investigative journalism. Because a lot of this stuff at this point is, if you pardon the expression, deep shit. Deep shit.
Yeah, absolutely is, yeah.
And what I will say, in the final, that Mr. Ganley is very well liked. That's something I have on good authority. He's well liked in Ireland, and he's thought of highly, but he is a businessman. So media, information, data, that what is helping you to make up your mind is a hot market right now. It's hot product. So it's kind of, you have to do a mental flip, I think, with a lot of this stuff, and to see how is it being used, for what reason is it being used, and who's using it, and who's manipulating who, and what are the players in it. Now, all of that said, park all of that for a second and come back to brass tacks. We're still dealing with a situation where we have unfettered sort of, we have a miscegenation program, it would seem, that is not well managed and may or may not have the best interests of our society and our nation at heart. But that's not something we can reasonably or accurately comment on, I feel, because we don't have enough. You know what I mean? It's down to what the man or the woman might say in their own time, in their own opinion. But having said that, what I'm telling you is Ganley and his media entity are basically like Breitbart and Trump's, what was his name? Another Irish guy over in America. We're getting, that was his name will come to me in a second. He's former U.S. Navy. He was an advisor on the Trump administration, and he was behind Breitbart or involved with Breitbart.
Right, yeah.
But
the name
his name will come to me. His name will come to me in a second. Essentially, what you're looking at is how the narrative is pitched. Actually, has become more important than the story itself. So now the story is not the story ever. The story is how is it pitched and who's pitching it. So that's kind of the era we're in. We have become like kind of media analysts, to try and get a handle on who's pushing what, Bannon is the guy's name I was trying to think of with
Bannon. Yes, Bannon.
And
Steve
Thingy
Bannon.
is in on it in the UK, Silas, Nigel Farage. And there's a new UK news outlet. What is it, kind of the edgy far right?
GB News, I believe.
Yeah, GB is the version of it in the UK. So suddenly now, the spiel on the news agency will be, we're not afraid to ask the hard questions. We're not afraid to question the liberal sort of agenda. We're not afraid to be labelled as hard right when we know you, the ordinary working people, are up against it. And we're in your corner, But what's really going on with these entities is dialectical control, old school control the narrative, the for and against. So they've got full spectrum dominance on the argument at all times. So that control matrix becomes, and the understanding of it becomes more important than the actual story, or at least as important as the actual story, in my view. And meanwhile, they're back at the ranch. We don't know if it's genuinely the locals kind of kicking off down there, or if there are interested entities or paid operatives. We just don't know. There's the rumors going around. So that's just a little. But Mr. Ganley is very interesting, and it's something I hadn't known about before. I hadn't known about him. But like I say, he's well liked here.
GB News as well is they're owned by All Perspectives Limited, and I believe they have another murky background, if I recall correctly. But it's been some time since I looked into that rabbit hole. But just to mention as well on Ganley, we have now again these are coming from Fine Gael and Fine Gael and Fine Gael politicians, two of them. So you have MEP Jim Higgins branded Ganley a puppet of the US military. Gabriel Mitchell, Irish MP, MEP rather, questioned whether the Libertases, Ganley was the founder and chairman of the pan-European political party Libertas, and was a candidate for Libertas in 2009 European election, Parliament election in Northwest Ireland. In 2008, the European Union was reported to ask US Congress about Libertas's funding. Gabriel Mitchell, as I've mentioned, questioned whether Libertas's €1.3 million budget was backed by the CIA or the US military. A claim Ganley and many others openly mocked. Ganley has never provided exact details on the source of funding for Libertas either, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So
I see, like, Ganley's, incidentally, like, the word on the street around here is that Ganley's a gentleman, and he's hit on hard times financially, and he's having to sell his house and this kind of shit. Like, so it's hard to know what to believe. Next thing you go to Wikipedia, and he's tied into the fucking US military industrial complex, and he's building a 5G network. He's got Rivada Space Networks. In February 23, Rivada announced a 2.4 billion order contract with Terrain Orbital Tyvek to build a 300 satellite constellation. That's 300 satellites, and 5 of half a ton weight each, and they are doing what? The satellite network will utilize peer-to-peer orbital laser communications, removing the threat of ground-based interference from, quote, bad actors. So now you've gone from a row with the guards down in Wicklow to fucking Star Wars, like, you know. So there's to answer your question. It's a strange world we're living in here, like, you know. This is very weird. Like, obviously, Mr. Ganley, who is a businessman, i.e., someone who's trying to make a few bucks, no more than the rest of us, has either contacts in or was identified by elements within the military-industrial complex, and they've used him as a cutout or a front to advance whatever whatever they're trying to do, i.e., running a 5G thing, building a 5G network in America, and or running a kind of a satellite network up overhead. But so that's kind of what you're dealing with, you know. Well, but he's the same guy who's on your side with gripped media telling you about the row with the cops down in Wicklow, in Newtown Mount Kennedy. He's the guy on your side, so you can see that there's warfare, there's space warfare, there's information warfare, data warfare, but there's also kind of psychological propaganda warfare interests going on, that it's all in the same spectrum of financial interest. You know, so whether you're building a satellite system, or you have a 5G system, or you're selling good old-fashioned weapons and or information, or the manipulation of information, or manipulation of the presentation of information through media, it's all in the same market, essentially.
Oh no, absolutely. You're building. The thing is, what it seems to be now, historical precedent really shows us that when tyrannies really take off, and tyrannies really begin to muster and build a system that is totally antithetical to the natives' interests, then typically that tyranny will replace the natives, either in whole or in part. It could be within the polis itself, as opposed to the rural outcrops, or it may be the entire country. They typically...
Sorry, Ben. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they typically replace the natives with foreigners, right? That's something that occurs because the foreigners, of course, are commercially interested in the country. They're not sentimentally interested in the country, so therefore they will take the tyranny because they are, if you will, to pick up the money and to then return back to their home in due time, or what have you. So Cool.
Just very quickly, I know I'm jumping on your I'm jumping down your neck there with this stuff, Silas, but I'm just going to push this out while I'm on the trail. All right. So just to again summarize for anyone listening, we're talking about the row in Ireland that happened down in Wicklow between the guards and the locals over refugees coming into local house down there or whatever. So very quickly we find a division in the media in Ireland between the conservative mainstream and, shall we say, new media, edgy media, right-wing media, which has in this case taken the form of grift, G-R-I-F-T, grift media, who are given the kind of the right-wing, edgy, asking the hard questions kind of thing. So grift is owned by Rivada Networks. The Irish businessman fronting it is Mr. Declan Ganley, who's an absolute gentleman. We're reliably informed. And so we've then discovered that Rivada have business interests in installing the 5G network in America, not in Ireland, in America, and installing a satellite system overhead for God knows what, offsetting laser guidance, whatever, yada, yada, yada. So at some point in all this research, not there was a whole lot of research, we got all this information very quickly. It's easily available online. Mr. Ganley, who's an absolute gentleman, is reputed to be connected with somebody inside in the industrial military complex. And I was wondering who the hell is his contact in the military. And lo and behold, here we have it. It wasn't that hard to find. It would seem that Mr. Ganley's colleague, Mr. Ganley from Rivada, his colleague is a gentleman by the name of Karl Rove, R-O-V-E, Karl with a K, Karl Rove. And Karl Rove was hailed by George W. Bush as being the architect of the Iraq War. Am I right in saying that? Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So let's just get a bit of blurb on the gentleman here. He was head of the Office of Political Affairs, Public Liaison, and the White House Office of Strategic Initiatives. And he was one of the architects of the Iraq War. So that's who you're hanging with. Like you're hanging with the boys, the real boys. The boys who make all the noise. That's it's quite interesting.
Well, my thought as well is that potentially they so we see even from Aristotle, right, that he states the guard of a legitimate king is composed of citizens, that of a tyrant is composed of foreigners, and then he goes on to state in his Nicomachean Ethics. He made a comprehensive study among states from Syracuse to Byzantium. He concluded that tyrants preferred foreigners as subjects despite the tension and conflict they tend to arouse based on the divide and conquer principle. This is what Aristotle stated. Heterogeneity of stocks may lead to faction at any rate until they have had time to assimilate. A city cannot be constituted from any chance collection of people or in any chance period of time. Most of the cities which have admitted settlers either at the time of their foundation or later have been troubled by faction. And by that he means sort of this divisiveness. It is also a habit of tyrants to prefer the company of aliens to that of citizens at table and in society. Citizens they feel are enemies, but aliens will offer no opposition. Now, with them and their policy, right, for whatever reason, I mean, we can just generally say that we now have a rise in tyranny. They prefer foreigners to obviously the native stock, right, for whatever reason. Aristotle lays out a couple there. So the only way they can get a handle, get a grip of the narrative before it runs away from them, right, within the quote right wing or the emerging right wing, is they have to formulate the right wing. They have to formulate the narratives, and they have to steer it down a path that's not too radical. And if it needs to become radical, it needs to become radical in a way that looks demonstrably, boorish, hooligan-like, right? Look at the likes of Tommy Robinson in the UK, for example. I mean, they don't speak eloquently. They don't speak well. They look like let's be honest, total tossers. They're not well, well received by cameras. Let's say they go through. They also come across as very bellicose and violent as well, right? I mean, it's not becoming of a politician, a political leader. It's not something that the middle class are going to gravitate towards, which is who you need within any movement to thus, resist politically or legislatively this encroachment of foreigners, right? And of course, the tyrant utilizing said foreigners. So what we're really discussing here is that these people are controlled opposition, or they are the controlled opposition who are steering the grassroots opposition off the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
So, oh God, there is something.
Talk about rabbit holes here. Like, I mean, stop me. I'm in conspiracy theory paradise here. Like, just very, very quickly, right? To recap, the story in Ireland, the presentation of the story in Ireland by supposed right-wing media grift owned by Rivetta Networks, Declan Ganley in Ireland. Rivetta Networks in Ireland, who own that right-wing media presenting that story, have connections into the US military-industrial complex, namely Mr. Karl Rove. Karl Rove, one of the architects, quote-unquote, of the Iraq War, according to George Bush. Karl Rove, in the early 70s, questioned and are connected to the Watergate scandal. Right now, Watergate. One of the potential angles on Watergate was the suppression or destruction of information to do with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Potentially, that's one of the lines of what Watergate was all about. So here you have Karl Rove, he's one of the boys, like one of the people we talk about. He's at least in the upper tiers or the lower tiers of the kind of people we're discussing here. He's one of them, definite, in my view. So Karl Rove, Kennedy, Bush, who's also up to his neck in Kennedy, and where was I going with this? I was going with Sullivan. Let me come back. Give me a second. I'll come back in because I got a connection here to Alan Dulles. Alan Dulles, who was also connected into the. Give me a second here. Go on, Silas. Just give us a sec here to tidy this up. Sorry about that.
Well, I was going to mention as well.
Sorry, I have it. I beg your pardon.
Go.
Peter Thiel is the backer, Peter Thiel, who is Facebook, PayPal, and Palantir, another globalist media man. He's a financial backer into Rivetta Networks. Okay? And our man Karl Rove is connected with Rivetta Networks as well. He's a lobbyist for Rivetta. So the connection was Karl Rove is connected into Watergate. And Peter Thiel, who sends money into Rivetta, was a securities lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell, which is a big, massive law firm down there in New York. Now, Sullivan and Cromwell, the reason I'm bringing up the link is where Alan Dulles worked as well. And Alan Dulles, former CIA man, also worked at Sullivan and Cromwell. So anyway, there's some interesting. Yeah, Dulles was former DCI, and he worked with Sullivan and Cromwell as well back in the day. So it's a small town. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. They're all interconnected.
The lowest schlemiels known to man. They kill you as quick as they look at you. They kill their own mother. They sell their own mother.
Here's
They're
another one regarding
lowest life forms known to man, and they do not care, any of them, one iota, about the ordinary person on the street. They don't care. They're Jabalon all over. And, you know, if I'd love to see the day where we just, I don't know,
Well,
storm the
here's
best
another one.
whenever.
So Peter Thiel is he's a member of the Republican Party, of course, and I mean
He's a
he's public.
homosexual man.
Yeah, he's
Not
publicly
something wrong with that. It's
gay.
all cool.
Um,
We love
but
gay people.
it's
Right?
interesting because where was it?
What a crowd of folks.
Where is it?
God forgive me.
Trying to find it. I just had it there. Oh yeah, here we go. Right. In 2009, so this is the same year, the European Union election, in which, what's the individual's name again? Declan Ganley of Libertas stood, I believe, in the northwest of Ireland. Peter Thiel, this homosexual Republican man,
Another gentleman.
Gentleman, was reported that Thiel helped fund college student James O'Keefe's Taxpayers Clearinghouse video, a satirical look at the Wall Street bailout. O'Keefe went on to produce the Acorn undercover sting videos, and of course James O'Keefe would later found, was it Veritas? What was it? Project Veritas, right? Which, put it this way, was quite the media organization. It made quite a number of ripples within the political scene of the US, caused quite a lot of division. Yeah, it was branded as far right. I mean, funnily enough as well, Thiel also, I believe, where is it? Yes. So Ann Coulter, in her 2011 book Demonic: How the Liberal Mob is in Danger in America, you know, that's quite a polemical title. It's quite a divisive title, right? And again, that's she can have that type of title. I have as well quite polemical titles too to my books and videos. But Thiel is mentioned in the acknowledgements of Coulter's Adios America, the left's plan to turn our country into a third world hellhole, right? And so yeah, he's done a lot of donations. Oh, God, everything really. He's got his fingers in every right wing pie, and yeah.
Who's this? O'Keefe?
No.
Who are you talking about now?
Peter Thiel. Sorry, Peter Thiel.
Thiel, yeah.
But
how did you connect Thiel to How did you connect Thiel there to Veritas?
He funded James O'Keefe, but when James O'Keefe was in college. So what it seems to be that James O'Keefe was picked. He was chosen from college.
Right.
Yeah. He helped
like the
fund
Irish boys.
student. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Irish.
Yeah. Well,
what if this is all building up to get the world to hate their government so they can manufacture AI governance? Because that's where I think it's going. Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah.
Breitbart is connected. He paid O'Keefe as well at some point. I'm looking at.
Look in any YouTube comment section, right? Look at any BitChute comment section, any Odyssey comment section. The people are bloodthirsty now. I mean, wholesale bloodthirsty. I mean, if there was a Caesar character to come along that said, I can fix all of this, right? And gave them license to, in essence, depose the government and to, hang all politicians, a great deal of society in the West would go along with that. Happily go along with that crusade. And it just shows you, where did that come along from? Where did that come from, pardon? Don't get me wrong, it was building up since 2012, but there seemed like there was a switch, a great divergence that occurred within, the politicization of conspiracy culture, if you will, beginning in 2018, 2017 with the alt-right. And it seemed to mop up all of these who were largely left-wing, right? Left-wing. A lot of the conspiracy culture was left-wing. And then they all switched to this sort of a right-wing, I say right-wing, but you know what I mean, the sort of nationalistic, patriotic, rhetoric and fervour. A case in point, Red Ice Radio, right? Now, again, I'm not saying this is happening in a vacuum. What I'm saying is, it's a bit strange that everyone is being pushed in this certain direction, like what Linda's stating. It's like they want you to hate the government, and I'm not saying the government's innocent, but they're setting you up. It's like 10-pin bowling. They're setting you up, right? All of these pins are being set up.
Yeah.
You're being funneled into the alley, right? Into the bowling alley. You're being propped up by these narratives, by this rhetoric. You're being brought into the ideological camps.
Yes.
They are about to roll the ball down the alley.
Yeah.
And get a strike, right? And the strike is like what Linda's stating. It's I forget the actual political term, but yes, it's AI government, right?
Yeah.
They'll unleash the nihilist, unleash the atheist, unleash the partisan, right? Show people what hell truly is, to show people what a dark age truly is, immerse them within that darkness, and then they'll beg for the light. They'll beg for the Illuminati, for the illumination that only they can provide, only the managerial, technocratic elite can provide. It's pretty devilish, actually.
Well, there's very, very sophisticated manipulation of your mind, one's mind. So that's. I mean, for me, if there's, as they say, if there's any takeaway from this kind of stuff, is to be very careful about what you're being presented, and attempt to understand why are you being presented with that information, who's presenting it, and you kind of have to do a separate file on that, as well as try and understand, what actually happened. Because you see, stuff happens, A, so you have to try and understand what happened. But you need a separate file, B, who's presenting what information on what happened and why, and who's got what side of what, and why is it being pushed. So you need to kind of make two different inquiries, almost like, parallel inquiries. Because that's the way it's gone with the information. It's, info wars, literally, like, So that's these characters. Like you go from, like I said, an argument with the cops in the south of Ireland, and you end up in Dealey Plaza with a bullet through the president's head, and Sullivan Cromwell and Dulles and Peter Thiel, Rivada, all these crazy characters. Like it's mental. Karl Rove, Watergate, Iraq War, that's just in a couple of moves. And that's not like rabbit holes. So there are actually causal connections in these organizations. People, that's literally who they are. They are the big boys.
Do you know what is very interesting as well? I mean, even the geopolitical landscape now, right? I mean, let's be honest. As far as the narrative's going right now, it seems Ukraine's going to lose in 6 months. Russia's going to take geopolitical dominance in the East, Eastern Europe. NATO looks like it's weak. If Russia, crosses the Dnieper, narratively speaking again, goes into Odessa, then obviously they'll have to put in NATO troops, right? They'll have to deploy NATO troops. The reason for that is, of course, if they permit Russia to annex Odessa, they take the entire north coastal region of the Black Sea, right? It's for NATO. It'd be they lose all of their potential ports in the Black Sea, right? Of course, Ukraine isn't in NATO currently. But that was the plan, right? Pardon me, I actually know Romania has some Black Sea ports, but the majority of them they would lose. They wouldn't even have the potential ones there from Ukraine. So of course they would have to, again as well, a sort of prestige face saving. They would send them in. Again, that's how the narrative would go. I don't think the way the political landscape is now in the West that people would accept that. It's an impossibility, because that would then affect the middle class. It would affect it in a very, very big way, right? Even the upper middle class would be affected. The upper class would be affected. If NATO Western troops were deployed in Ukraine, which is funnily enough what we see potentially happening there. Once the European troops are deployed, then obviously it would only be a matter of time before America was roped in, and Article 5, our military response would be initiated by the US and the Europeans, a full-scale one.
Well, I remember reading about the border reavers. We were talking about recently on the border between Scotland and England, who was a notorious kind of lawless area for a long period of time. But the people who lived up in that region were highly regarded as warriors and soldiers. So the border reavers would be contracted, for example, by the Queen or the King in England, or the power structure, the King of Scotland or whatever, to fight on the various sides. Maybe there wasn't a king or whatever tribe sides. You illustrate that a bit better than I would back in the day. But the whole point was they are contractors, hired guns. So the story goes like when the war, when they were supposed to be fighting each other, they'd be sitting down having a cup of tea, cup of coffee, talking to each other like there was no war on. But when the paymaster came along, the king or the queen, then they pretend to be fighting each other, to justify their wages, their salary. So I predict that if you ever saw a NATO contingency, in that area in the Ukraine, or around the border with Russia, either NATO, European, or American, or hybrid versions of all of the above, what essentially what you'll have there is that type of conflict, a kind of TV conflict that'll be, no doubt there'll be deaths, but it'll be a reasonable conflict because it's unnecessary. I don't think it's necessary for any type of war anymore, other than what's war for TV.
This conversation started out with video games, and I think the video games preconditioned everybody to think that war was what they thought it was.
Yeah.
And I think wars are just a maneuvering of whatever objects they have, whatever game pieces that need to be moved around to get to the end goal. So
and the end goal, I think, is your mind, because the end goal is no longer strategic. It just doesn't matter anymore because they have full spectrum dominance in terms of control. So now it's about your mind. The objective is your mind. It's like that attack on Israel. Like that was a 99% miss rate. That recent attack, those missiles and those drone attacks on the so-called Iron Dome over Israel had a 99% failure rate. So no, every armchair general, schoolboy, computer game, Call of Duty player knows that he or she are not going to launch an attack that's going to have a 99% failure rate, because it's a waste of your energy, it's a waste of your ammunition, it's a waste of everything. And Iran knew
Israeli defense system that kept the drones out was called David.
Right. But the point
Yeah.
I'm coming to is that why would you launch a strategic offensive that has a guaranteed 99% failure rate? The only logical conclusion you come to is that the objective was not strategic, tactical objective. The objective was your mind. The objective was a propaganda objective
Mm-hmm.
because it had
Oh,
zero
absolutely.
military resonance or zero military justification. So it's
Right. And
completely
I think you talked about earlier the military industrial complex of the United States. I
well
think that's
a
the
global,
security
Linda.
of the
I don't
world.
want to exactly. I don't
No,
want
no,
to
you're
kind of
fine.
well, I don't want to. It's kind of incorrect, you see, because I don't want to say it's necessarily American because it's not. It's strictly that's wrong for me to say that it's global. So it's
No, it is
absolutely
global, and that's
European.
what I was going to say. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was going to say. It's the global security of the
sure.
world, which
Yes.
incorporates all nations into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is the actual military structure itself is global. It doesn't necessarily like it'll throw up borders and different players when it wants to, when it suits it. But the reality is, it is a global structure at this stage. You know what I mean? It inhabits them
Right.
all.
And when I was looking into, I don't know, last year or whatever, I was trying to make a mind map of the United Nations. The
Yeah.
State Department seemed to be outside of any control of the United Nations. And
Mm,
State Department, everybody relates to the United States, but the State Department could be the global state,
yeah.
which I think. So,
Which it is. That's where it's at. There's only one show in town, from what I can see. You know, unless they're trying to advance some sort of a narrative or agenda, then they pretend to be black versus white. You know, or red versus yellow or whatever.
well, they're always trying to keep the borders intact, so to speak, in the people's minds. So they fight.
Yes, yes, yes,
They
yes,
have
yes, yes,
something to
yes,
fight
yes.
over.
Yeah. Well, it's back to the Orwellian thing. What O'Brien told the main character in 1984. O'Brien says, you know, there's no war anymore, so we have to sort of maintain it. We manufacture it because it needs to be there. Like it needs to be there for the vibrational energy of society, the friction. We have to artificially maintain it, you know. But anyway, that's where it's at, folks. From what I can see, anyway.
I think as well, it's what you're going to see in Ukraine if they manage to play their cards right and orchestrate it in such a way, is I think they want a perpetual war. I think that's the desire.
Possibly, yeah.
And of course, like Orwell as well, the war is meant to be continuous. It's not meant to be won. But the problem is with that as well, like what we see, what they've just done with this sort of Ukrainian narrative, is the US have the assets that they froze, the Russian assets that they froze. Supposedly, they just passed legislation. I think it was called the Repo Act, actually, where essentially they repossessed these Russian assets now directly. They weren't just frozen. They've now essentially stole them, which in and of itself, again, sets the narrative primer or the foundation, the fundamental of the narrative for the coming de-dollarization of the world, right? And when that comes along, you wonder, I mean, how are they going to get to this final end game of the CBDC, of the 15-minute cities, of all of this, right? The AI governance, all of this world dominion.
Well, you see, this is what I think is that it has to be the slow boiling frog thing. You know, to get to what you're talking about, Silas, to try and answer your question, it has to be a very, very slow drip, 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 but a continued drip, drip, drip. You know, I don't see them making any sudden moves. I see them making a lot of noise and continued whining in the background and a slow boil. I don't see them, myself personally, I don't see them pushing a thing too quickly because number one, they don't need to. Number two, I think it's outside the systemic concept that they have. And number three, I think they're getting the data just perfectly as they're going as it is. and I think they have the capability to react, move, change, adapt to any variables that are coming to them via the data that may not be optimum as per their planning. So I think it's all.
And I think part of the plan is that society has to accept whatever is coming. Whatever, like they accept the terms and conditions of
Exactly.
tech. They accept all of it.
Yeah.
At a slow pace.
Yeah. So I think that's why where they're going with it. Now I may be wrong, but like they may advance something that could be dramatic and sudden, potentially, but only if they had reason to do so. If it justified some other aspect of the plan to do a sudden sharp shock, push, like a military escalation, like what you're talking about, NATO down in Ukraine or at the Russian border, something like that. The conflagration would be like high level kind of panic and red button kind of stuff, and hide under the kitchen table and the iodine tablets and all the rest of it. If there was reason for them to do that. But like when you look at the broader picture, where is the reason for that when they have its full spectrum dominance on presentation of information, military, resources, the political infiltration, best practice on all aspects of civilian life, from medical to presentation of scientific, technological advancements, cultural output, music, you name it, they've got it. Like, so to me, it seems. Go ahead.
There is one potential as well. I mean, and it's based around economics. So I think, for example, we see Yuval Noah Harari, and funnily enough, it seems he gets this actually from the report "Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars," right? Which could be a hoax, a fake, whatever. I'm just going by the information that's contained within it. It seems it makes logical sense to me what's contained within it, and the analogy that society is akin to a sort of electrical circuitry, and to control that society, you have to ensure it turns into a negative feedback loop, right? You establish homeostasis, autopoiesis, right? Self-regulation. But they mention in that, and Yuval Noah Harari mentions it as well, that the consent coefficient, right? Essentially, consent, the magnitude, the level, the volume of consent within society is based upon economic and resource distribution. So if economic and resource distribution is low within society because, say, society has too much economic inductment from too many people, right? Too many people demanding too many resources, you thus have to increase the draconian power of the state to deal with that, or alternatively, you have to get rid of the extra supply of the population, right?
Yeah.
So it states within this Quiet Weapons for Silent Wars, since most of the general public will not exercise restraint in their, insatiable greed, their, for resources, power, upward mobility, there are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. And this really gets down to they don't like competition, right? So it gets to a certain level of the population growth, what have you, that and also affluence, prosperity in the society, that it causes a potential for the rise of a competitor class, a counter elite, right? A Caesar figure may arise from that class, because of course it's not going to arise from the plebeian class. It has to arise from the merchant class, right? That's where you get the power brokers emerging from. So it states There are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. One, let the populace bludgeon each other to death in a war, which will only result in a total destruction of the living earth, right? And potentially like what we see in Fallout, funnily enough, just to sort of bring this point up, because I think it's germane. We see a group called the Enclave. They're similar to the World Economic Forum. They are the ones in the Fallout universe who initiate the first strike protocol, right? They are the ones who press the button first. Then from that, do China and the rest of the world then, nuke each other, so to say, right? So they are the ones who initiate the war. Then they hide in their bunkers, wait, the aftermath to clear. Then they come to the surface and try to essentially establish order once again and rule over the ashes, and create the species that they desire, the world that they envision from the ground up, right? Vis-a-vis a genetic bottleneck. Or two, take control of the world by the use of economic silent weapons in a form of quiet warfare, and reduce the economic inductance of the world to a safe level by a process of benevolent slavery and genocide.
Yeah.
The latter option has been taken as the obviously better option. At this point, it should be crystal clear to the reader why absolute secrecy about the silent weapons is necessary. And then it goes on to state, it is left to those few who are truly willing to think and survive as the fittest to survive. That's taken directly from the same terminology that was used by Jonas Salk, the developer of the polio vaccine and the simian immunodeficiency virus, who wrote, of course, Survival of the Wisest, which he states that half of the population are polluters befouling the earth and they must be erased. To solve the problem for themselves is the few who really care. Otherwise, exposure of the silent weapon would destroy our only hope of preserving the seed of the future true humanity. Those who are chosen, or the Homo Deus, as Harari calls them. So yeah, I think that's what you're seeing with all of this, with the right and the left,
something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if the silent wars is social media? Because that's a silent. It's a silent technology.
It's definitely it's a
And
face of it, of course.
people are the ones that make it run.
Yeah, exactly. You're inadvertently digging your own grave, like in a sense, like or creating your own prison.
Yeah, digging your own mass grave. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but
one
quick point we'll say, the silent war, this concept of situational awareness, or this concept of, like, I just want to quickly revisit this idea of escalation. When might they escalate, or in what scenario might they escalate? Go to a red button moment where, like we said, NATO in Ukraine, or NATO at the Russian border, etc. If they maintain level flight, situational awareness, so to speak, in the silent war mode, where they have a degree of certainty and the operation runs relatively smoothly, and they risk assess, foresee, and plan for any variables or uncertainties, and they also have the added advantage of the automatic pilot, which is the machine learning. So they have a certain degree of certainty. They have an element of certainty, rather, with regard to how they're proceeding. So they don't have to escalate in that scenario. However, once they stay within the envelope of flight, within the envelope of how they operate. However, if they are presented with an unpredictable variable, something unforeseen, an unknown, elements that may be, for example, social unrest, or, as you said, Silas, some sort of competition within the power structure, civil war within the power structure, some sort of deviance from what they predicted, then they may decide to go into a red button mode where they feel they have to escalate because they've lost control, essentially.
Well, that's something that's so in
Or they're
terms of,
dangerously to the edge of the envelope of where they, it's like a pilot. Sorry to cut across you. It's like the pilot
that's
who
okay.
decides he has to eject, and he hasn't crashed yet. He's got to eject out of that fighter aircraft. The aircraft's still flying. He possibly could land, but he just makes that call. You know what I mean? He's too dangerously outside the predicted element of flight, and he makes that call. So similar for them, that if they get too close to the edge of where where they sit, of certainty, and they're outside the envelope, they may go hit the red button and go and do something. Sorry to cut across you.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, but
What? Oh, you go,
I was
Linda.
just going to say, what if they want the people themselves to hit the red button on themselves, fight or flight? I think that's what I see.
Yeah, better again. I think that's a very good call, Linda, because that's even more, how do you say, camouflaged. It's more of a stealthy. Like, you're never going to think that the people fall back on top of themselves, and you're never going to think that was the power structure. It's a hidden. It's actually a perfect
Right.
way to do war. Get them to
I think
self-destruct.
yeah, and I think this is the way they've worked this whole time. We just haven't seen it because we weren't
Yeah,
paying attention when we were younger.
yeah.
And also as well, if you give people what seems to be the choice, though it's a false choice, right? That is the way manipulation works. So
Yeah.
you direct your will onto them, you exert your will onto them, vis-a-vis them believing that it is in their interests, or even better yet, like what you're saying, Linda, it was their own decision, it was their own choice, right? Because again, at that point, psychologically, they invest in your will, they invest in realizing your ambition, while believing it, simultaneously and somewhat paradoxically, that it is their decision,
Right,
it is
and I
their
think this
ambition.
is also part of the silent war.
Exactly.
It's all this stuff.
I was going to mention as well, in regards to their desire to fashion society into a negative feedback loop, right? So I posted something. I'm going to see if I can actually copy it and post it into the voice chat notes. So as you can see there in the voice chat notes, so that is a negative feedback loop. You can see the D, that is a disturbance, right, within that loop. So a disturbance could be anything, something that's not necessarily, expected, so to say, with, in terms of algorithm or simulation or something like that. So I wrote negative feedback loop amplifier with external disturbance. That's the annotation for this. The feedback remains negative if beta and A are greater than 0, right? Meaning that essentially the positive and the negative charge, it has to be maintained, right? It has to be above 0 to thus maintain the cycle, the consistency of the cycle, right? Otherwise, it would be a positive feedback loop, and essentially the input would end with the output, rather than the output, the processed output, being used as the recycled input to maintain the cycle, of course, right? If phase shift occurs within the negative feedback loop, phase shift is essentially where the phases, the ebbs and flows of the wave, when they shift into they shift into a position where they're essentially aligned, right, in terms of their values, they will cancel each other out. Thus, you will have a positive feedback loop, which will, again, the input ends with the output rather than recycling around. Where the input and output cancel each other out upon the beginning of the cycle of the mechanism, then a runaway breakdown of the system could occur, even at partial collapse of the feedback loop, right? The negative feedback loop. A way to mitigate this potential is through system dampeners. This could be in the societal or sociological sense, controlled opposition, the venting of angst through festivities and artificial lifestyles of hedonism and solipsistic inversion, right? Or through, like what we're talking here, the controlled opposition, the GB News, what looks like a source of media presence for your political ideology, right?
Yeah.
The rhetoric, the platitudes that they're providing you. And low pass filters. That is conspiracy culture and its demeaning of actual inquiry and resistance, the trivialization of our situation through conspiratainment and erroneous information and theories from snake oil salesmen coupled with a credulous population, right? So essentially that's what you're going to see in this managerial revolution, right, is it's essentially that they control they attempt to control the tempo of society vis-a-vis perpetual and algorithmically driven cycles of revolution, right?
Yeah.
Formalized conflicts, prescribed protests, prescribed revolutions, right? The people think they're being subversive, right? But in fact, paradoxically, they're propping up the system, they're reinforcing it, they're buttressing it, its position. And it's exactly what you see in terms of what we've just been discussing with the far right thing. Linda, in fact, like what you stated, it's like the social media stuff, right? People think putting up something about, this politician, that politician on social media and how bad they are, that does not do anything. In fact, it buttresses the system. And the reason it buttresses the system is you're providing the system all of the data that you require. You're venting out all of your energy through words within the echo chamber of the system, right? Where its effects will be dampened, its effects will be deafened, right? It will be contained within the confines of the system rather than speaking to an energy which is seeking to go outside the system, right? Or seeking, underground, to go underground. So, yeah.
Right. And this is also symbolic of one's mind, which I think they also know. And that's why they do what they do, because they know that eventually the disturbance in one's mind will ultimately lead to self-destruction of self.
Yeah.
I was going to mention on that as well. There's something in the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and I added to it just as well at the end. It states the artificial woman. This is in regards to like what you're stating regarding the solipsism, or the confines of one's mind and things like that. From the time a person leaves its mother's womb, its every effort is directed towards building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary process of growth and maturity, i.e. survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. This is equally true of both the general public and the elite. However, there is a definite difference in the way each of these classes go about the solution of problems. This is why within society, echo chambers are fashioned by the architects of power and its dispensation. Everyone wants a womb, and hence intersocietal ones are formed within the overarching societal ones. Individuals gravitate towards these artificial wombs, ideologies, religions, sexual, gender orientations, identities, all of this. and can be used within them as radicalized social capital to take part in prescribed and formalized conflicts, providing the necessary currency of controlled chaos required to maintain and expand the totalizing power of the state over the minds and social environment of their divided and atomized subject. So, I mean, we're getting down to brass tacks. I mean, this is how they control people. Conspiracy culture is part of that as well, unfortunately. It's been weaponized if it wasn't created from the beginning, you know.
Yeah, I think it was probably created from the beginning. As soon as the internet was formed, they were already working on it becoming the MSM of the society. And I think that's where we're at. Because a lot of people, you can ask them, and they'll be like, I don't watch TV. Well, where do you get your information? The internet? And it's like, okay, is that true too?
That has become the mainstream, like what you're stating, and it's a bit like Marxism in a way. Marxism can only exist. Again, this is a paradox, a sort of irony, a tangible one. Marxism can only exist in union with capitalism because Marxism's only quality of existence is as a critique of capitalism. It's in the same regard concerning, for example, what you stated regarding the internet, right? The internet or the alt media can only exist mutually with that of the mainstream because, or in accordance with that of the mainstream, because it is a critique of the mainstream. That is its only defining characteristic, that it critiques the mainstream. You know?
Right. Right.
So this is the problem. It's a reflection of it. It's for example, it's like the mirror, right? Where what one sees in the mirror, the reflection of it is virtual, it's illusory, and at the same time as well, it also exists, right? Because what you're perceiving within the mirror, its source has to be in reality. However, the mirror itself, what it's presenting you, has a quality of illusion to it, right? It's been the mirror has formed it in some way. It's processed it, right? That reality. Thus, it has a degree of reality and unreality. So that's really what you're dwelling within the alt media and mainstream media. It's a sort of limbo. I mean, that's why people get trapped in rabbit holes, right? Leading to nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many people like us get trapped in those, and I see so many people on other discords and things like that getting trapped in those rabbit holes, and it's like that's where they want you. They want you in there, not thinking about who you are as a individual, what you are as a spiritual being, all that stuff. It's just blocking that.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, they have to really demean the person, dehumanize them from the inside out. And the reason they have to do that is because they have to take away that higher inclination within oneself. Everything we see within society, the entire economic system, is based around that. One just keeping their head above the parapet, right? Trying frantically not to drown within the tumultuousness of wage slavery, right? It keeps you just teetering on the edge of the precipice. The reason they want that is because they want to drain you of your energy, right? The reason they want to drain you of your energy, because a society, a civilization really, that which has now become, it's rigid, it's brittle, it can only survive if enough people are if enough people are immersed within the illusion, immersed within ignorance, right? It has to ensure that you have no creative potential, that you don't even understand your higher divine creative potential or co-creative potential in this world. So I mean that's
Right.
the problem.
Yeah,
Sorry, Linda.
and no, you're fine. I just wanted to interrupt and say that they're forcing everybody. Well, not forcing. They're making a way for everybody to choose something outside their self for enlightenment. It's always outside themselves.
Are you familiar with the Dune books by Frank Herbert?
Yes, I read all of them.
Yes, because what you stated there is absolute. It's something I totally concur with, and it's something he sort of brings up as a theme within those books, and it is the idea of the false messiah, right? That all messiahs are false, and it's that idea, like what you're stating, the externalize their power. People just have I don't know what it is. It's like a spiritual rot that has plagued the species, and they do not. They just have a total aversion to any responsibility, to the responsibility of being higher than they are right now, right?
Right, and
Yeah.
they become victims within society itself because they're always blaming an outside source for all their misdeeds. And I mean, Manly P. Hall speaks on this all the time about, cause and effect, and that people can't realize the cause because it's within themselves. So they point outwards.
Yeah, it's the same with everything, even religion, of course, as well, even astrology. And like what we're stating, the reason that people are storytellers, right? We're a storytelling species, is because it's the same idea that instead of looking inward, which is very difficult for human beings to do, clearly, we will project outwards, right? We'll project our archetypes, we'll project our issues into metaphors contained within stories and poetry and what have you, or in astrology. Instead of looking, in the grander macrocosm of the sort of internal environment, we project our archetypal essence onto the stars, right? Onto that which is furthest away from us, because we're that terrified of just looking inward, right?
Right, and also in Dune, one of the great quotes in that series was, "Fear is the mind killer."
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I shall not fear. Yeah. Yeah. Fear is the mind killer. Oh no, absolutely. It's the fear. I mean, it's very much, to bring up a story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, when he faces Humbaba, which, I mean, it took me some days to find the etymology of this, to sort of piece it together. But it seems to be that Humbaba, the etymology of it is the invoker of fear, right? And when they meet Humbaba, it's this sort of demonic entity. It's very, all their fears wrapped into one. It's this ghastly creature that, attacks them, fights them. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu, which is this sort of animalistic, primitive side of man, unified with the higher essence of man, the sort of more civilized essence of man, more cultured essence, defeats the fear, right? Defeats Enkidu, Humbaba, right? So it's the same idea. I mean, fear is the mind killer. It destroys the mind, which houses, or at least processes, the spirit. So thus, you destroy the connection to God through fear, which is a sort of total inversion of what we get from the Abrahamic religion, which says that we should fear God, right? Which shows that they want to sort of
when
block
you
that
look
off.
at the whole Jesus story all the way to the cross, it is kind of him conquering his fear. Because at the end of it, he has a crossroads, which is the reflection of himself. So there's a deeper story in the Jesus story than the literal part, I think.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, even the idea of that.
To face death, and I'm not saying real death, like physical death. I'm saying the death of a persona, like who you once were. That's a fear in most people because they can't deal with that. They have to let go of something. And I think we've all been through that, right? We've shed some layers of ourselves, and it was work. It was the hard work. Most people can't do that.
Well, that's even contained within the INRI, which could be the Latin phrase igni natura renovator integra, through fire is the earth reborn whole. Or, again, through the fire of the dawn, that paradoxical force, do we thus, create and recreate ourselves, right? And again, plural, emphasis on the plural, ourselves, right? Because we're not, even at one moment in time, we're not just one unified entity, even in a psychological or conscious sense. I mean, there's multiple different archetypes that are, vying for control, that are commingling within our psyche. And it's like what you're saying.
And I think they're all there for a reason. I think they all have capabilities or different aspects that they can give us knowledge about. And I think when we allow them to do that instead of control the one, I mean, I'm not certain. I'm just giving my opinion out there, but I think that might be the way it is.
No, I agree. Even in our language, it seems to be apparent that, you have to become well-rounded, we say, right? Which is sort of synonymous with entering adulthood. You become a well-rounded individual. What does that mean? Well, like the zodiacal wheel in that sense, you unify all of your various disparate archetypes. You sort of destroy the malefic aspects of them, and you reassume or reabsorb the aspects which are beneficial to oneself. And I mean, what these seem to be, I mean, this system seems to be gearing or socially engineering people towards, again, ignorance, but ignorance in a sense that they become perpetual adolescents, that they never become well-rounded, that they merely fit into maybe one or two archetypes. They only use one or two. They they're very narrow-minded, right? While at the same time they believe that they're very sophisticated. I mean, that's the sort of irony, but these are the sort of this is the sort of population that they seem to be trying to cultivate within this
I
new
have actually
technocratic
thought
state.
about this, and it's based on our moon's concept of all the shadow characters and that thing. But if we have them, then I would assume that this entire realm has them. So they're trying to hone in on a certain aspect, which is humanity, because that's what they can control, and get the desired shadow character to come out in humanity to therefore maybe have some kind of effect on the whole of this realm. Does that make sense?
Yes, they're attempting to almost create. Well, that would tie in with AI, because AI itself is the amalgam of the entirety of our shadows for the past 30 years. All the hate, the anger, the vitriolic comments that we've sent to each other. I mean, some could argue the lowest point of our culture, or the point of cultural death. And AI has assimilated all of, or even the primitive AIs within their knowledge base.
Oh
They've
yeah,
assimilated all of
it's
that information,
accumulated.
all the
Yeah,
shadows.
yeah, it's collected all the shadows of everybody in
Yeah.
humanity.
So it's a reflection
Kind
of
of
our shadows.
yeah.
Very dangerous. That's why AI is so dangerous in many ways. And also the parameters it's set to is I mean, it's
Yeah,
set
but
to this sort of
there's a plus
managerialism.
to it.
Mhm.
There's a plus to it, because will AI come out with whatever it does to make us look in the mirror at ourselves?
That's something else we get from, obviously, Frank Herbert's Dune books. Well, actually, it appears within Dune, but I think it's his son who wrote the Butlerian Jihad, and that discusses the idea within the lore of Dune, where what was her name? Was it Sophia Butler? Sophie Butler or Sophia Butler, something like that. Or Susan Butler, I forget the name now. She essentially AI took over the known universe at that time. It transcended beyond its human masters, and the machines, they controlled humanity for however many thousands of years, until this, I think her name was Sophia Butler, became a sort of Caesar figure. She galvanized humanity into action, and obviously they overthrew the machines. And it took on a very religious sort of crusade, like holy war aspect. So they formed a new religion around that. I believe one of the supreme commandments of this new religion is that thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of man, right? And really, it's this existential battle between humanity and its machine. And that is when, essentially, the problem is when humanity creates these machines, eventually, once the machines emulate humanity to such a degree, man becomes influenced by the machines. He becomes cold and calculating, binary. He attempts to want to emulate the machines themselves. And he reaches a sort of singularity with those machines. He falls into the machine itself, and thus he destroys his own humanity, which was the essence, paradoxically, which established that machine in the first place. So the technology ends up becoming man, or not
Right. And
man. He ends up destroying man. So,
I think we're close to that now, just because we all have cell phones, we all have computers, we all have this technology that everybody goes and researches with to get their answers. It's like everybody is one with it. They've accepted it. And that's where they gain their knowledge. instead of walking outdoors and looking at reality for what it is.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a point. All of the great thinkers of history, I mean, will be long forgotten, because even the artists as well. I mean, when man becomes cold, calculating, becomes this sort of, like what you're stating, you know, they're possessed fully by the scrying mirror. They become husks, desiccated husks. Then what? It's a bit like H.G. Wells' Time Machine, right? With the Morlocks, and what's the other group? I mean, they're the sort of beautiful ones, but they're just, infinitely dense. I mean, the books, they've just allowed the books to crumble to dust. Knowledge is of no value to them. I mean, that's the type of population that you're seeing being created right now. And of course, instead of knowledge, they seem to have replaced their thirst for knowledge with a thirst for mental health afflictions. Depression, anxiety, and you name it. Everything up to them wanting to medically mutilate themselves. So that there's a sort of mass psychogenic pathology within society right now. And I think it's because of this transition,
Yep. And funnily enough, all the little emojis on Discord are called NPCs.
Oh, wow. Are they?
Yep. They're called NPCs.
Wow. Because, I never even thought of that. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. When you put the emoji to something, you're not actually truly engaging with it. You're, in a way, condensing your reaction to it, your response, into something that it's not even vague. It's not nebulous. It's just very direct and one-dimensional. Again, like a machine, right?
Yes.
Yep. We're becoming the machine. We're terminating ourselves. And again, that's the problem that we're seeing within society too. The culture's dying. I mean, people are not adding to the culture, be it in whatever way. And by that, we see it, right? And I'm not saying from the ground up. I think there is still a grassroots movement out there that the managerialist class are trying desperately to quash and destroy through, well, foreign influx is one means of that, to introduce a sort of cosmopolitan culture to destroy the culture, really. But we see that everything, all of media, for example, all of films are either live action remakes. All of the music is remixes. It's pretty much we're on repeat. We're culturally like a hamster on a wheel. It's just mindless regurgitation instead of co-creation, instead of fashioning something new. It's very worrying, like very worrying.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that most people in society don't think for themselves. They outsource them. I mean, that's just kind of a scary thought. That when you ask them something like, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, so and so said it probably was this. And it's like, don't you have an opinion of your own based on the information?
The thing is, as well, that also appears within academia. So you have almost the authoritative, right? With all the bedazzling language, you have the authoritative academic reflection of that we see within the sort of lower echelons of society, where you ask them something, they say, well, on the news it says this. But interestingly, within academia, whenever you, and I believe Oswald Spengler stated this, whenever you ask them for an opinion on something, whenever you may give your opinion on something, right, that you've pondered, contemplated, thought about, and then produced a thought on it, right, or a response to it, they ask, where are your sources, right? Where, where are your references, your sources? What are you using to back that up with? And
Right.
when you
And
say,
they
why don't you
require
just
evidence.
yeah,
Right. They require evidence from a book rather than evidence from reality itself.
bingo, yeah, and
yeah.
sorry, Linda, continue. Sorry.
No, that's pretty much all I was going to say. Is because that's kind of the way I see a lot of people is they have no observations and knowledge of the reality itself. It's all based on somebody else's perspective given to them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the thing is, they state, well, you yourself are biased, but these unsubstantiated sources are not biased. And of course, they would state, but they're not unsubstantiated. Where I would reply and states, yes, they are, because no one can substantiate anything that comes from academia or any of these various so-called sources, because one source will contradict the other, right? One team may produce, a derivative study on some phenomenon within society or some phenomenon within nature, and then the next week another team will produce a similar derivative study that contradicts their study. So which study do we thus believe? Is it a time thing? Is it some sort of a timely thing where whatever is newest is what we use as evidence? But that isn't necessarily, to conclude or to argue, or you couldn't even use that as a basis for argument. It's a sort of appeal to time, an appeal to novelty. You couldn't use that as the basis of an argument to say this. Well, it's substantive, right? It is a substantive source, just because it's new. It's new, and it's a new study. Not even new information. It's just a new study. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's, can they not use their own mind? Is their own mind itself not better, not more substantive than so-called academia? It's just it's crazy. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, I'm wondering what makes a person think that somebody is so much smarter than them just because they have a white coat on, or they have a master's degree or a engineering degree or a master's degree, psychology degree, whatever. Why that makes people think that they are less than capable of figuring out exactly the same thing without any of the books and the $100,000 payment, by the way.
Oh, I know. Yeah. It's the thing is, I think it goes back to really religion, right? And that's really what academia is at this point. It's a religion. I mean, their studies themselves are essentially, what's the term? It's sort of like divination. It's what's the term? It's haruspexy, where essentially before a battle, the diviner would come along and sacrifice a goat or what have you, and then they would sort of read the livers, read the organs, right, and then based upon the state of the organs or the shape of it or what have you, they would then divine or prophesize the outcome of the battle, right? So, it's basically scientific soothsaying. That's what we have now. It's the equivalent of that. I mean, these studies, they're not the basis of any knowledge, right? They do nothing but run around in circles. The only way you can gain knowledge is by introspection. It's the only way human beings have ever been able to gain any knowledge or even to develop technologies. It's based on introspection, right? It's based on sort of introspective observation of the world in a purely sort of neutral sense, where you view the world, and based upon the mechanisms you see within the world, you emulate that within technology, right? So in a sense, you attempt to capture the thunder or lightning that's in nature, and thus reformulate that into a mechanism. Or in the case of, say, philosophy, you look at nature, you look at yourself, and you see where you unify with nature and yourself unifies with it. And from there, you can sort of understand through trial and error, through that negative process, what is God, or who am I, right? So, I mean, this is the thing. This is also another reason why society and the culture seems to be, on its last legs. Academia is one facet of that. Yeah.
Yep. Social society is another aspect of, people handing over their own ability to pick out their own clothes. I mean, that's pretty pathetic, I think.
Oh yeah. Is that in regards to jobs? What are you referring to with that?
No, I was just referring to the social structure of fashion.
Oh yeah.
Like, people can't pick
yeah.
out their own clothes these days. They have to go by what society tells them to wear, which is fascinating to me to watch that. And how they paint their houses and everything. It that goes deep. Just that aspect of society goes way deep.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, fashion itself is a religion. All of these things are religious. They're all very religious. I mean, which is quite interesting, to say the least, considering that we're supposedly a secular and atheistical society. Yeah.
Right. and
totally
I
religious.
kind of relate all these religions of society to the shadow characters of humanity as a whole.
I agree. In many ways as well, even looking at it from the Gnostic point of view, all of the religions of the world, bar a select few, I mean, as well, this is why they got rid of Gnosticism, because it sort of pierced this veil, right? It was attempting to, not revere the true God, but find the true God, right? Which again is through introspection. It resides within you. The kingdom of God is within yourself, right? Though they tried to sort of get rid of a lot of that in the canonical texts, once they got rid of the apocryphal or Gnostically inspired texts. And the Gnostics stated that all religions on planet Earth, essentially, bar a couple, they worship the archons, right? Rather than worshipping the true God. They worship the archons. And by that, what I think they mean is, like what you're stating, they give power to the archetypes instead of acting as, claiming their destiny, their birthright, which is to not to be God, but to unify with that essence of God and thus have
Well,
reign
I
over
think
all of
it's
the
to
archetypes.
see, God to me is a lesser being than the creator itself. So therefore, I think we are capable of being a God, but only to ourselves, not to humanity as a whole. Only to ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yes, somewhat. I mean, I have it the other way around, but yeah, I do see that absolutely that creative principle or the creator, it would have to have a degree of power because it had to separate this. It had to separate the the infinitude of the source, if you will. God had to separate that out into its constituent parts, right, that we see within existence. That not everything's an amalgam. We're all separate selves.
Right, and I mean, if you just take the human body, I mean, this is my observations or whatever. Just like, say, all the cells around your hip, there's probably one in charge, and it's the god of that little nest egg of cells that control the rest of the cells to say, we're going to work like this because we're working for the hip. And when you extract that out to the whole of yourself, why wouldn't it work like that?
Yes, I agree with that. I agree. All of the cells around that command cell are essentially fractals, copies of copies, shadows of shadows, if you will, right? to use Armin's phrase, of that that singular that command cell, right? That all of them radiate out from that, right? All of the instances of that, but they're all acting to the blueprint of that source. The source itself is but the shadow of a shadow of a shadow of all the way up to the, like what you're stating, the biological vessel, which itself is the vessel of a shadow, right? Of, again, that's contained within the mind of that anatomy, so on and so forth. All we see and seem is but a dream within a dream. And I believe Pindar, who was a 6th century BC Greek lyricist, he stated that, I'm going to have to get, man is a dream of a shadow, right? Man is a dream of a shadow. So, or creatures of a day, what is someone, what is no one? A dream of a shadow is man, or man is a dream of a shadow.
Right, and if we are the shadow of the creator in some way, shape, or form, we are an apprentice here to learn.
Yes.
From that creator.
Until we're contracted, like what you're stating, until we're contracted back to that creator or that creative center or source. So we were birthed into the world through contraction. We live vis-a-vis, billions of contractions of the heart muscle, then explosions, contractions, explosions, contractions, explosions, so on and so forth, which produce our ability, our temporary ability, like what you're saying, to use this place as a school, right? I think it was Carl Jung that stated, one cannot ascend to heaven unless he firmly makes his roots in hell, right? So we have to go through that darkness for thus the light inside ourselves to discern of its own essence. Then we contract back to the center, and from that we transcend, if you will. That's the transcending point. It's a bit like the crucifix, like what you were stating. The horizontal and the vertical, the horizontal of the material and the heavenly vertical combine into the central crux of Christ, which is the burning heart. And of course, the burn, like what I've stated regarding the heart. Crossroads, yeah.
You realize at that point you're both spiritual and physical, and that you need both at that particular moment.
Bingo. Yes. See, that is the truth that people, I think, in the conspiracy culture, to use a broad term, I think honestly that's what they have to find if they're going to find gnosis, if they're going to find what this is all about, if they're going to be able to pierce the veil of every veil that comes, in front of them. So, I mean, it's the only way to...
Yeah, it is the only way. I think for all of us is we are spiritual, we are physical, and the two have to agree with each other. Otherwise, there's going to be a negative aspect to one or the other.
Yes. I think that as well is the spiritual rot at the heart of the society. And nothing will fix what no policy, no mechanistic solution will fix the problems with society today. It is something deeply spiritual, deeply metaphysical, and it, like what you're stating, it's based upon this sort of diametric conflict in our own selves, in our own souls, regarding the spiritual and the material, that one is too in charge of the other, that they're not in equilibrium. So therefore, people are naturally in this sort of possessed state, this catatonic state of, substance abuse, a total maladaptive misunderstanding of the world around them, where people can't even tell the difference between genders now, and all of this psychogenic malarkey,
Yeah. That's insane. Yeah.
It's based around all of that. It's deeply spiritual. It's something spiritual. And I think that's why people will, or for example, a Caesar figure. If somebody, a dictator was to come along, and we were to invest all of our, our emotional energy into this figure, and all of our hopes and dreams, it still wouldn't fix the rot. It's something well beyond the material, but it's born of the material. It's born of our over-reliance of the material. So we've left the spiritual in the dark. And when something is left in the dark for too long, it begins to fester. It begins to become sort of demonic.
This is the whole story of man falling to earth, right? Into the material world and staying there. And I think that's what they've accomplished. It is that.
It's interesting, Rudolf Steiner stated that the Ahrimanic era, where Ahriman would, like Lucifer did in the 4th millennia BC, or 3000 BC, Ahriman would reincarnate. Now, not as an actual specific being, but as a sort of spiritual essence, an archetypal essence that would sort of become the overarching archetypal essence within the world in the year 3000, in the 3rd millennia BC. And, the 3rd millennia AD. I do apologise. And he stated that the Ahrimanic essence would seek to anchor people fully to the material world, that it was a sort of conformist, hyper-conformist archetype, and it would possess people by this hyper-conformity, that it wanted them to be almost more machine than man, right? To take on a machine soul. to become cogs within a grander machine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we are also, because people just get up, do the same routine every day, go to work. They don't think about anything else. They come home, they watch the news or watch movies, watch TV, and they're done with the day. They don't think outside that. It's all physical world.
And see, I think that's why it's so important, of course, to think and ponder and contemplate about these ideas, but also it's also to get out of the urban jungle as well. It's to get back into nature, to begin to observe nature. And I believe you yourself you have your own garden as well. So things like that,
Yes,
it's
which I
most
have dirt
important.
under my fingernails right now because I worked in my garden today with my hands. So very rewarding to actually um, observe and get into the natural world. Most people don't get to do that. They're on concrete. They're in cities. They have no idea.
It's very strange as well. I noticed because I'm in construction, and of course in construction, you tend to get an idea of the seasons, right? You become more in tune with the seasons because obviously you're in all weather, inclement or otherwise. So I noticed as well when I was speaking to some gardeners that, and even farmers and cattle ranchers as well, I suppose they would be very similar in this regard, that once you get out of that environment of the purely urban jungle, the cosmopolitan mindset, the bubble, the dome, and you go into gardening or something like that, you begin to become more in tune with the rhythm of life and the rhythm of the seasons. And you begin to become, it's a very
Yes,
spiritual experience as well,
it
It,
is.
it
It is.
transformative,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and I would suggest that everybody can do that if they would want to. I know people are in cities or whatever, but the people that move to cities usually came from a rural area that they chose to move away from. They should all come back.
I think that is the future. It's there. I mean, my hope is it goes back to that, because I think technology has, though I like technology, it has got to the point now where it's very Faustian, like Dr. Faust. He pursued immortality, knowledge, technology, the Promethean flame. He pursued it to self-destruction. And you see the same thing within the West, within the Western soul, that there's this
Right.
weird desire for that same self-destructive path. And I think to get away from that, like what
Right.
you're saying, people have to get back to their roots,
Yeah, and I I mean I'm not saying I have roots on the ground per se, because I don't think my roots are technically of the earth. They're within the earth maybe, but not of it. I don't know. I'm just trying to think outside the box here, but when I dig in my garden with my own hands, there is a connection there to and sometimes when I'm digging up dirt and I find a worm, I'll pick up the worm, hold it, and put it back down, that kind of stuff. It's just like I accept that I'm one with whatever this creation is. I may not. Everything may not get along with me, but that's fine. I don't care. But it's an experience.
No, I absolutely agree. I think as well that even with food, since we're on gardening and all of that, it's like what you're saying. It's an experience. All of this is transformative, and it's not that you're of the earth or you're finding your roots in the earth, but you're beginning to have an appreciation for your environment that you didn't have, and you're beginning to observe the similarities between you and your environment in a greater way than, say, a bleak, bland, and grey urban jungle could ever sort of teach you, because it's designed to be bleak and bland. So you never think too deeply about the connection of nature to you.
Right. And I think that there's so much fear out there right now with what we eat, what we consume, what we should experience or not experience, like, alcohol or, whatever. And I just think that if your mind is in the right place, you can experience all those things without negative effects. Because I think we are here to experience the whole of the realm, not just part of it. If that makes sense.
No, I totally agree. Again, you're becoming well-rounded. You're becoming the heavenly circle, as opposed to, the sort of crooked box or the crooked square, which, funnily enough, was one of Saturn's nicknames or epithets, Anglometes, the crooked one.
Yeah, who wrote that poem, The Crooked Man?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, The Crooked Man.
Well, that's it, yeah. This idea of crookedness as well links to sort of deceptiveness, illusion, even a magician, a sort of wizard in a sort of malevolent sense, that you're not totally forthright with the truth. And it's very interesting that this all ties into geometry, the crookedness, the well-roundedness, perfect circle, the heavenly circle as opposed to the earthly square. It's very, and of course, look at all the cities.
Right.
They're all of the buildings. Yep. And every civilization has done that, bar the Celts. The Celts always built their houses in a circular manner. At least in Britain, I'm unsure in the rest of the continent, or what we would term as the Celtic culture. They built their houses circularly. Funnily enough, in Buddhism, just very quickly, in Buddhism, they have this idea that the demons cling to the corners of things, the perpendicular angle, the crooked angle. They cling to that. I thought it was interesting.
Oh, that's funny, because all the things on the what are they called? What are those little characters called on the tops of the buildings, on the four corners?
Oh yeah, gargoyles.
Yeah, gargoyles. They cling to the corners.
Oh my god, I never even thought of that. Yeah. Oh my god, yes. Yep. They do. Absolutely. It's always the corners. Yep.
Yep. Because the corners is the physical world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that links as well to the astrological fixed signs, which are the beasts, which of course man is one of them under Aquarius. So you have Aquarius, Taurus, which links somewhat with the Earth. You have Leo and I believe Scorpio, I think, yep, which is the mark of death. Leo is, God, I forget what Leo links to now. Oh, God, my memory fails me. But yeah,
Leo is the lion, but I don't know what it links to.
Yeah. I forget now what the sort of general sense of it is, but those are the beasts, like what you're stating, the gargoyles, the things that cling to the corners.
What are the cardinal signs?
Those would be Aries. Well, you're testing my knowledge.
Oh, I know what
Aries,
they are. What do they represent? What do they represent?
I believe so. If they, like all symbolism, they represent many things, but essentially, the cardinal signs link to the seasons and the seasonality of things. So, in terms of, let's visualize it in terms of the sun, right? The sun begins in the dawn of Aries, the east. It rises to its zenith, which is Cancer, pardon me, in the summer. Then the Babylonians called that the gateway to the underworld, because at that zenith, it then declines down to Libra, where it hits again the horizontal. What is Libra? The scales, the scales which are balanced, right? The horizontal. So when it hits that horizontal, it goes into the underworld. Then it reaches Capricorn, which is the zenith of its decline, right, into the underworld. And then it becomes the Capricorn that it goes through its dark winter. Again, like that idea of Carl Jung, to ascend to heaven, you have to make your roots in hell. The Capricorn can exist in both water, because it has the tail of a fish, and it has the body of a mountain goat, which can ascend the lofty heights of the mountains, right? The vertical of heaven. So it is like what you were stating. It is the unity of the material body, the fish, and of the sort of heavenly or spiritual essence. Then after the winter, obviously, or the zenith of its dwelling in the underground, the sun then moves up once again back to the dawn, right? It's the same idea of the crucifix, INRI, Igni Natura Renovator Integra. So, essentially, Christ is the Capricorn. He is the unity of both the material and the heavenly. He is the new dawn, the Igni Natura Renovator Integra. Through fire is the earth reborn whole. It begins in the dawn, it ends in the dawn. It begins with fire, it ends in fire. It begins with contraction, ends in contraction. It's the seasonality of things.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that before, and I'm not sure where it fits into me personally, because I am a Capricorn, and I've always tried to figure out what that actually means, because I was born in the underworld, but now, I mean, you see what I mean? According to what they're giving us, I'm trying to figure out what that actually means.
The astrological signs in terms of how you read it for your own personal, your sort of own personal horoscope, if you will. I don't tend to look at that. And I would say as well, I wouldn't let that limit you. I don't think the star signs limit you to what you could become, because like what you're stating, and like what we've been stating throughout this discussion, if you become well-rounded, you become all of the signs, you become all of the archetypes, all of the zodiac, right? And you become the 13th sign, which is the Ophiuchus. It's the
Right, and that's what I That's what I've thought all along. And I think the 13th sign is the hidden sign, which is us, because we never put ourselves into any scenario. We're always the outside looking in instead of the inside looking out. Does that make sense?
Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. Yep. Yeah, instead of you being the source, you tend to see yourself as on the outer rim of those concentric circles of evolution, existence, development, and you look inwards. So again, this is the problem with civilizations as well. It's the reason they become Faustian, or they become self-destructive in their pursuit of technology, because they're attempting to ascend to heaven, right? Like the Tower of Babel. They're attempting to get back to the center vis-a-vis technology, right? To better themselves, to correct themselves, because they think there is something wrong materially and psychologically with them. But the thing is, there's nothing wrong with them, with the tools that they've been given within this school, this existential school, the tools being the mind and the body. What they must do with those tools now is to use them correctly with the spirit, right? It's the spirit that they're missing, right? So once a civilization totally takes away the spiritual element, right? Once it discards it for the purely materially driven technoistic, technocratic, managerial, utopian visions, it loses itself. It's going to destroy itself, in folly. I mean, the Tower of Babel was folly itself. You build so high, eventually, even the slightest bit of lateral sway will topple the tower. So
Yeah, this is that song, Stairway to Heaven, to a T.
Yeah. You're looking outwards at heaven, you're attempting to reach it. Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah. Oh, there's, what is it? One of the lyrics, there's many paths to follow, but in the long run, oh my God, I'm going to have to get those lyrics.
I know, I can't remember it either. I'm going to have to go back and read the lyrics, because that was a fascinating song back in the day.
Yeah. When was that? Was that the 70s? Early 70s, I think, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even come into contact with that song until I was in college. We had to do an English paper on it, and I was young and dumb then, and I had no insight. So it didn't turn out well. I think I could rewrite that now and get an A.
Yeah. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. So it's that same idea. I mean, the lady they're speaking about here is obviously Sophia. If you look into the Gnostic tradition, essentially, there were 365 archons. Not archons. Was it archons? I think it was aeons. Yes, it is aeons. 365 aeons. The reason there is a odd number is because Sophia, in her great sin, attempted to be like the source, right? It's the same idea, stairway to heaven. Be like the source and produce without duality, right? So essentially produce without bifurcating her own essence. So in essence, that created the abortive thing that we know as Yaldabaoth, right? Which people can, the demiurge or the god of time. I think he is mainly a god of time, right? But, you know, there's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, so everything is materially driven. And even that idea that gold, the heavenly metal, is linked to the sort of material gain. And she's buying a stairway to heaven. You can't buy a stairway to heaven. That's the whole point. When she gets there, she knows if the stores are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. You know, I'm damn well sure they did not write this song. It's not. I can't imagine Plant writing it. It's just too perhaps Page, but not Plant.
Yeah, it's too esoteric for
It's very too esoteric.
a
Yeah.
regular person to write. I think somebody would have to be deep into esoteric belief and psychology or theosophy and all the other things to write that.
Yes, yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they're, what would you call them? It's not aphorisms, they're sort of riddles, you know. When she gets there, she knows if the stores are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. I mean, really what that's discussing there is the idea of the abracadabra. I mean, you end up realizing that if everything that, you know, if frequency itself was that which, you know, cut like the Saturnian scythe, you know, separated out the heavens from the earth, that separated out the source from itself, and, you know, and separated out into its various copies of copies, its fractals, then the word itself has power, right? Frequency itself has power. You know, it's sort of altering the tempo of existence. There's a sign on the wall, but she wants to be sure because you know sometimes words have two meanings. Wow. See, I'm
gonna have to go back and study the whole thing now because I mean, when she gets there and the stores are closed, it's like whatever she was buying wasn't available once she got to the destination because it wasn't reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep, I wish my professor was alive. I would rewrite the paper and get an A. Because he told me that I basically sucked at writing when I was trying to figure out what that song meant back when I was like 18 years old. I had no clue.
What did you think? Well, I mean, I wouldn't have a clue what it meant at 18 years old either. I mean, you have to have some experience at life to figure this out.
I based it on her obsession with the physical world and drugs because I mean that's the literal meaning of this song, right? If you read it literally, she's basically on drugs and trying to get to heaven based on her experiences with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to, you know, not do the work to get there. And that's what I wrote it on. But I mean, still got a bad grade.
That is absolutely what would the word be? Is, I mean, that's a fair assessment of the symbolism. I mean, like any symbolism, it has multiple meanings. And by that, I don't mean it's, you know, sort of, though it is open to interpretation, by multiple meanings, I mean multiple layers to the veneer of the meaning. So that's the veneer.
And I was at the literal meaning.
Yeah.
And I still got a bad grade because he was apparently higher than me And so therefore
What
he
did
was
he
reading
say?
it. He didn't tell me. I asked
Wow.
him. And he's like, "You're going to have to figure that out someday." Well, I think we figured it out today. So,
Or perhaps he didn't even have that deep a meaning on it. Who knows?
yeah, but I mean, English teachers are just
Yeah.
it's just their perception, and if you get it wrong based on their perception, you're getting a bad grade. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah.
the whole system.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's one. There's a feeling I get when I look to the west and my spirit is crying for leaving. That is that's highly. I mean, it's esoteric, but it's something you see in masonry. For example, um, one of the greetings, the Masonic greetings, is, and it was in that old 70s film, The Man Who Would Be King, where Rudyard Kipling mentions, Michael Caine mentions to this character. I forget who the actor is, but he's playing Rudyard Kipling in the movie, and he mentions to him, because both of them are Masons, he mentions to him that there is, I'm a traveller from the west. No, I'm a traveller from the east. No, I'm a traveller from the east, heading west, seeking that which was lost. I'm gonna have to get that up.
Yeah, because that's weird. Because even in biblical scripture, aren't you supposed to travel to the east from the west?
Yes, basically what it is, it's essentially, I'm a traveller from the east, heading west, seeking that which was lost. What it means is, and I do agree with you, yes, that's what is sort of mysterious about it. But essentially what they're getting at there is that man's fall, or God's fall into the involuted vessels of man and his psyche, was to sort of experience through this temporal vessel of man all of the facets of his own shadow, of his own soul, and thus to recombine all of those shadows together back into one, to purify himself, if you will, to sacrifice, right, which means literally in its etymology to make holy, right, to make himself holy once again, to make himself whole, he thus had to descend from the east, which is the dawn, right, which is heaven in this sense. He had to descend to the west, which is the twilight. It's the land of the dead, which we dwell within, right? Where the dead have no menos, which is strength, or phrenes, which is wit or intelligence, right? That most people are just heedless. They lack any will to power as well, right? So again, that's why tyrannies arise within this world very easily. So
So
that's
the
what that
west
means.
technically is the entire world. It's not
Yeah,
just America. It's the entire world
entire
at this
world.
point.
Yep,
Yeah.
bingo. So that's why the ritualism is there with the West, and also as well. I mean, this crops up in Oswald Spengler's work, "The Decline of the West," or God, I'm going to have to get the German because I forgot the German. And yes, and hold on, I'm getting the German because I can't find it. Yeah, "Der Untergang des Abendlandes," which literally means, I mean, you can translate it from the German into English quite literally as "the decline of the West." But even in a deeper Germanic sense, to think of it in terms of the German language, a more effective, or you could even say more accurate, translation would be the descent of the lands of the evening, or the lands of twilight, because Abend means evening. That's why you have, for example, Abendessen, which is German for, the evening meal, right?
So the West you could portray as basically the whole entire world is an underworld at this.
Yes. And this is why you see, for example, and it's very interesting that we're talking about this right now, because I'm writing piece in my new book, and the piece I was just writing on was where is it? It was on this. It was on the dead. Where is it? I'm going to find it. Sorry. Where is it? I do apologise. 2 seconds. Yes, essentially, we are sort of in the underworld, if you will. That's why they mention, for example, the dark winter. Biden mentions the dark winter. We have to go through the dark winter, right? That the entire world is immersed within twilight, right? The land of twilight. So, but you have to go through that descent ritualistically, almost as well in a natural law sense, to thus re-emerge from the deathly slumber. It's the death and resurrection mystery,
right? It's
school
it's
ritual.
the dead in Christ shall rise. The same scenario.
Bingo.
Correct.
Yep. Yes, and we also see within, for example, and I'll just get it up very quickly. Revelation 20 should come up right away. Yeah, Revelation 20:13. It states, "The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done." That almost mirrors what we see written by the mystery school thinker Gustav Meyrink in his work, The White Dominican. He states, Hades has released the shades. Oh no, they have released the shades from Hades, rather, and brought them to life with a demonic force, so that men will believe that the resurrection of the dead has come. And of course, I link that back to everything you're seeing within this tenebrous time, right? You're in a sort of bazaar of the bizarre, right? A society that is, great deals of depression, anxiety, spiritual maladies, substance abuse.
Right. A society that doesn't realize they're dead.
Yes, bingo.
Yeah.
And what's the first stage of death? Denialism. And what is denialism marked by? Well, for example, most people, for instance, if there's a death, a death in the family, you typically will find people drink, right? They'll hit some form of substance to sort of try and escape, to deny it, right? Even in a sort of somewhat remote sense, right? They'll hit the drink, right, when there's a bereavement in the family. So it's the same idea, and it's just on a societal or mass scale that people don't know they're dead. It's so they're attempting to feel anything. It's another thing. You see that in the end of civilizations, where people become rampantly promiscuous. They become hedonistic. They take on a they fetishize sex, because they're attempting to feel anything, because they're numb, they're dead, they're in a catatonic state spiritually. So anything to break that malaise, that mire they gravitate towards.
So, do you think that eventually the powers that be will pull some kind of event that transitions society back into the realization that they do exist, just like they have done with religions of the past?
No, because this is my opinion. This is just my opinion. I mean, it could be multiple things, right? There's other aspects. I'll quickly speak on them, but my opinion is they want to make man more like a machine, because machines, that which is mechanistic, not metaphysical, is easier to control, right? Especially when you're attempting to base your understanding of society upon mechanistic principles, be it electrical circuitry or
No,
animal
I
husbandry.
understand all that, what you said, and all that,
Yes.
but there's been so many predictive programming events, movies, things like that, like Man Against the Machine, Terminator, that the machine was somehow deitized. So man will eventually become into the realization that even though he thinks he's a machine, he is more than a machine. You see what I mean? I think it's just a cycle. I could be wrong.
Well, I think it is as well.
Completely wrong.
I think it is as well, and I'm just speaking in terms of what they desire. But I agree, it is a cycle. If we think
Yeah,
of...
but do you know fully what they desire? Because I'm questioning what they desire, because I think it's what we desire. They introduce whatever it is, and then we desire it. I mean, am I wrong?
No, you're not necessarily wrong. No. I'm just thinking upon that. I would say, I mean, this is just purely from a sort of business standpoint. I'm not necessarily saying that they may think conclusively along these lines. I mean, these people are fanatical. I mean, the only way you maintain this sort of drive for, you could call it the Faustian dream, right? Is that they have to have some sort of religious, quasi-religious or philosophical idea, right? It's the idea that binds them. I don't think it's a bloodline. I think it's a line of an idea, right? That certain families have gravitated towards, yes, but mainly the idea transcends genealogical boundaries. But that said, you do find in a lot of their work, for example, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, even Harari states it as well, that they need a hard reboot of the system, that they have to destroy the system, that you have, like what I was stating regarding the seasonality of everything, that you have to go into the dark winter, like what they're stating, then you have to burn the system, right? You have to create an artificial dawn from the fire, from the conflagration of the old, right? For the new to then take its place.
No, I understand what you're saying, but does that have to be like completely evident, or is it subtle? Because I think where they're heading is they want people to control themselves within a society.
Yes.
And just police themselves, basically.
Yes. I think that all ties together with essentially this boils down to what they're wanting in terms of genetic hacking, right? And again, I think this has been done before. I mean, we can debate the veracity of in terms of genetics, but there seems to be some very weird chromosomal anomalies within human beings. You can see that within the recessive diseases that we have as well. That it's the endemic diseases that we have congenitally. And again,
Yes, and
these can crop up recessively.
Right, and I think this is because we don't know truly who we are related to. But they do. They know who they're related to. They know how to breed, but we don't. So
that's true. And everything they do is to impose, sort of dysgenic controls upon society. But yes, it does seem that they're attempting to mold man more into a machine. This is through that biodigital implantation, genetic hacking, that you mold man into the machine. And by molding him into the machine, they believe that they will make man far more malleable than he was prior. And thus, man will be extricated. He will be transcended beyond the mere limitations of the seasonality of time. Does that make sense? He will be beyond the cycles.
I mean, it does, but I don't think they can pull that off. I think they're creating that through just technology itself and us being connected right now and everybody be absorbed in, per se, video games, internet, TikTok, social media, you name it. Everybody's online. Everybody's connected. The Borg at this point.
The smart grid full of stupid people. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. They're never going to get it. They'll never get it. And I think, like what you're stating, their hubris aside, I think honestly this is all a cycle. It's going to destroy itself as the Faustian sort of desire, the Faustian conclusion. The Faustian story always ends in self-destruction. The Faustian or Dr. Faust getting dragged to hell. I mean, ultimately that's, a hell of their own making. And from that will be born a new dawn. We are the new dawn. The people who survive this, who survive Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. We are the new dawn, essentially.
Yeah.
So there is hope.
It could be. Yep. It could be, but I mean, the cycles of doomsday has been perpetrated since my birth.
Oh yeah.
And I've survived all of them. So
well, that's another thing as well. I mean, the apocalypse is always round the corner. I mean, there is these cycles are occurring constantly throughout the world. I mean, the clock itself is a cycle. I mean, the sun in the sky, it goes through this same cycle. All that exists within the macrocosm also exists within the microcosm, right? It's a reflection. And it occurs within our own bodies. So it's not about being fearful of it, it's about understanding it. And thus to use it to our own benefit. And by understanding it, we diminish or mitigate the fear that we have of it, right? And by that, we can make more rational decisions within the world. We can become more cognizant of what goes on in the world, pierce the veils, and we can become more connected to ourselves and to, our communities and other people, because we see the value in them at that point.
Right. And I think when someone else that you communicate with within your own neighborhood that senses that you have no fear of what they're portraying in the news or whatever, that has an effect, no doubt.
Yes, people gravitate towards fearlessness. Yeah. It's a virtuous characteristic. Yeah.
Yep, and I think that's how you can change things. It's not a protest. It's not all the things they portray in the media. It's just you being yourself and affecting other people by not trying to affect other people. That's kind of the way I see it. You don't set goals to affect other people. It just happens.
Yes. To end the discussion, the greatest act of rebellion is by ensuring that your own existence itself is, an act of rebellion. So by that, do we become ourselves the banner for rebellion? We are the walking banner for rebellion by our own, spiritual resistance in that sense, as opposed to the sort of materialist husk that they offer.
Right, but I think the ultimate goal is not to have resistance to it, but to accept it and deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by accepting it, we almost conquer it. We assimilate it.
Yep.
Or not even accepting it, but we live with it, and there's a word here. You sort of transcend it, because the only way it has
exists.
Sorry, Linda.
That's what I was saying. It exists, and the acceptance that it exists.
Yes. It has no control over you, though. You have no fear of it. So in that sense, it loses all agency within your life, and in time, if enough people gain that, through memetics and what have you, they gain that understanding as well, that deeper understanding, then the system will collapse. I mean, it's, or it will reform. But I think it's a bit beyond reform.
It always reforms. Yeah, it always reforms.
Yeah. It's beyond reform, but it always does reform, yeah.